Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, is Chewbacca's best friend. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
That's right. I met Chewbacca, the real Chewbacca.
The real one.
In real life, for real.
Yeah. He didn't die. You thought he was going to die, but then he didn't die.
No, he was on a different ship.
Yeah. Matt, this week on the show, we're going to do something a little different. I like when we do these kind of random one-off test ourselves episodes, and that's kind of what we're doing today, because you had a recent experience and you wanted to talk about that experience, and then we thought it'd be fun to take that experience and expand upon it and talk about a different kind of storytelling, right?
That's right. Another way of saying this is that I went on vacation for a week to go to Disneyland. And of course, what I have to do with that experience is turn it into content.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do. But yeah, no, I also, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say here at the jump that we are not sponsored by Disney. But if they wanted to, we would be willing to negotiate.
Right. Apparently, everyone on the internet assumes that you're sponsored by Disney if you say anything good about Disney at this point in history.
Yeah. Or Lord of the Rings spinoff shows.
Yeah. Nobody's ever offered to sponsor us for anything. I can say that. So
there's folks, I appreciate and love all you loyal listeners of this podcast out here. There's not enough of you for anyone to pay me money to say anything about anything.
Yeah, right. So that being said, I went to Disneyland, and it was really fun. And it was really fun in a lot of specific ways that I think are interesting to talk about. And what you just said, I'm gonna just ride on that, because
sure,
that was kind of how I pitched you on having this conversation, is that Disneyland is a sort of medium of entertainment. It's it's a place you go to and you experience a lot of what you could call live theater, or what you could call just immersive experiences, like we talked about Meow Wolf in a previous podcast, which is like Disneyland in some ways, but then when you go to Disneyland, you realize Disneyland is all of that except like scaled up times 100 and like perfect. So
wow, okay, so we're perfect. Okay,
well, so when I say perfect, like, it's interesting because it's like as perfect as money can make it is kind of what I mean, where it's like for in the experiential side of things.
Sure.
And it's really this like machine of nostalgia and entertainment. So, I think maybe a good place to start this conversation is Star Wars Land. And I say that because you and I'd like to talk about Star Wars. And also there was a very popular Jenny Nicholson video about the Star Wars Hotel.
Yes.
Which it's a good video. It is 4 hours long, but it's an entertaining video about a hotel which has already been closed down because it didn't get enough business. All of her complaints about the Disney Star Wars Hotel notwithstanding, I think they were pretty successful in what they're trying to do with Star Wars Land. And I mean, I think they're like empirically successful because people are like crazy for it. And
sure,
that's part of what I want to talk about. I want to try to separate the business discussion from the entertainment discussion, though, and just start talking about the entertainment discussion first.
Sure. Yeah. And full disclosure, I have not been to Star Wars Land. I've been to Disney World before. I've been to Disneyland too. I think I have been to both of the Disneys. Land is obviously the inferior one, so you really fucked up there.
Well, I've been told on the authority of a lot of Californians that you're totally off base there.
Oh wow, that's shocking that Californians would think that. I don't believe that's Yeah,
they have no skin in the game here, obviously.
I think that was the perception beforehand, like, because back in the old days when we were young, Disney World had like all the different parks, and Disneyland basically just had Magic Kingdom stuff. But Disneyland has expanded itself pretty considerably since then, including what you're talking about here, the Star Wars Land stuff. So, yeah. So go describe Star Wars Land to me.
It's very, it's very successful at what it's trying to do, which is make you feel like you're walking into Star Wars. Like it's pretty cool. Like you walk into Star Wars Land, you kind of walk through this tunnel, um, and as soon as you're through the tunnel, like everything you see is done up to look like you're in one of these like Star Wars kind of frontier towns. It's not quite Mos Eisley. It's not quite exactly any particular Star Wars town, but everything has that je ne sais quoi Star Wars nature to it.
Mm-hmm.
And like down to like really really nice touches, like all of the employees are wearing sort of generic Star Wars clothing, and you can buy a Coke from the shop, obviously, but it's the Coke is like in a weird, it kind of looks like a thermal detonator, and like it doesn't say Coca-Cola, or it says it in the Aurebesh Star Wars letters, um so just it's very like attentive to the kinds of details where if you were in Star Wars Land and then you went to buy a Coke and it was just a Coke, that would kind of be like, oh, okay, so this is just a commercial product that's being sold to me cynically, but which it still is, obviously, but the attention to detail makes you feel a little bit less exploited, which I think is actually important when it comes to these things. um, and you walk around the area and it's just really well thought out geographically. I watched a YouTube video about how these environments are designed, actually, and how they're designed to be kind of windy and have a lot of loops and circles into them, so that you never have like a long sight line where you would see the end of the place.
Mm-hmm.
You like if you try to look in a straight line, you can never see across the whole space. And that it basically, I just think it's really, I just love environments like this where there's something about the architecturing or the layout of it that drives you to explore, and then you start following your desire to explore, and then you just you come across all these cool just cool sights to see. Like it's one of those things where it sounds stupid when you explain it, I guess, but it's like there is just something cool about walking by like a really cool sci-fi prop, and it's like big and imposing and cool, and like maybe it's just like a you know broken engine or something that's sitting by the side of the path, or maybe it's like a full-sized A-wing sitting on a launch pad somewhere, and you can just look at it and be like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing from the movies that I saw when I was a kid, and it's right there. It's like you could walk, like you can't actually walk up to it and touch it because it's behind a thing, but like it is actually right there. And and it's in you walk around a corner and you see like the entire Millennium Falcon is just sitting there on a launch pad. And it's probably one of those things where it's hard to express to non-Star Wars kids, right? But it's like to see the Millennium Falcon is just very cool, and they know that, and they like they're very good at knowing exactly who their audience is and how to pander to me. I mean to them. Um, and yeah, so like then on top of that, they've got like Chewbacca walking around, and there's like stormtroopers walking around, R2D2's walking around. Um, I think Ray is walking around. Nobody cares about Ray, but they've
Ooh, ouch.
they've got a variety of stuff, and like so that's just this is just Star Wars Land. Like we haven't even started talking about the
Yeah.
rides yet, and I probably already talked for like 10 minutes, and it's just like they've really carefully thought about how to make like just a really appealing space and inviting and appealing space for people who like this stuff. And then so like you're already having a great time and you haven't even gotten on the rides yet, which is interesting, right? Like I just think this is an interesting thing. Like I guess it was surprising to me is what I'll say.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it to be that compelling even before I have gotten on the rides.
Yeah, and so I think this is where I can kind of step in and kind of give my perspective on this, which this when I first heard about this, Star Wars Land specifically, but just these kind of theme lands in general, um, it was like the kind of thing where my immediate response was, if this had existed when I was a kid, I would have absolutely lost my fucking mind,
Hmm.
and needed to go and wanted to go and probably would have had the absolute best time of my life ever. Um, the thing I think about it now is, And again, I haven't been to Star Wars Land. I did watch the 4-hour Jenny Nicholson video, which is mostly about the hotel, not about Star Wars Land, but they do have a little bit in Star Wars Land there. It just felt to me a little bit silly,
Uh-huh.
and I guess the reason I'm saying that is not to like admonish you for the way you felt about this thing, because I'm wondering if you felt that way too before going there. That like this is a thing that I think my kids will get a kick out of, but for me, a 38-year-old adult, it's a little, isn't this a little silly and a little like, so you said like when you, full
Yes.
transparency, when you said there was an A-wing sitting there or like some sci-fi prop, I was like, yeah, but it probably looks fake. It probably doesn't look real. Or even if it does look real, you could still tell that's not an actual thing. That's just a prop. Like that was my gut reaction. And I don't think that's a fair gut reaction, but like that's what I feel.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is based off of sort of the fact that I did experience Universal Studios Harry Potter world
Hmm.
stuff, um, which I thought was neat. And again, it was like if I was like a kid really into Harry Potter, I would have like lost my mind.
Yeah.
But that was really it for me.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's a weird spot to be in because it feels vaguely embarrassing to be like, no, it worked on me super well actually. Uh but I get, I think I'm a little past being embarrassed first of all. Also, like it just did. Like so I didn't go to Star Wars Land thinking um we're going to Disneyland for me, and my priority is to go to Star Wars Land and see a bunch of Star Wars stuff.
Hmm.
That was it was no, we're going to Star Wars, we're going to Disneyland for the kids. While we're there, of course, we'll swing by Star Wars Land because I'm curious to see what that's like. I've heard a lot about it. The kids obviously are down to see it. They're interested in seeing it. They've got cool Star Wars rides that they'd like to do. And then as soon as we show up, like I'm obviously the person who's enjoying it the most. Um, and like I wasn't expecting it, and part of it is the fact that it's Star Wars, obviously, and that I grew up
Yeah.
with Star Wars. But part of it is just like it's charming and well done. Like that's what I mean when I say it sounds stupid to say it, but like when you're in an environment that's just really thoughtfully designed. This is going to be the worst analogy in the world, but like if you ever been in like a really like beautiful cathedral or something, it feels like magical and holy and stuff, right? and
Yes.
and it's like, well, I mean, it's the same thing fundamentally. It's
Oh,
that
is it?
it's that somebody has built a space and they've put a ton of time and attention and detail and care into the presentation of it. And like you could find a flaw if you looked for it, but like the gestalt of it when you let it wash over you is effective. um and in fact, like I did kind of look for flaws, and it's like it looks pretty good. Like it looks like an A-wing. I mean, first of all, the A-wing was a prop anyway. There's no such
Sure.
thing as a real A-wing. So
No, yes, but the magic of filmmaking is such that they can disguise the clear props behind clever lighting and special
uh-huh.
effects, right?
Well,
Whereas
yeah.
the flat real sun that we exist under just ruins everything and
Yeah.
exposes the artifice of everything.
But it still works surprisingly well given all of that is what I'll say. And like some of the rides, I don't know if I want to segue straight into talking about the rides, but like um yeah, let's segue into talking about the rides. There doesn't need
Sure.
to be a structure because for me, one interesting thing about the rides is like all of the Star Wars Land rides just blended into the Star Wars Land experience, and that was one aspect of the holistic Star Wars Land experience that surprised me. Is it's not like other parts of the park where like you're just in Disneyland and it's like there's the Incredicoaster. It's a the Incredibles themed roller coaster. You get on it and it's a roller coaster, and there's some Incredibles stuff painted on
Hmm.
and there's a giant statue of Jack Jack. It's the Incredibles roller coaster. There's no sense of like a wholeness to that experience, and that's fine. It's a great roller coaster. We went in it several times, but the Star Wars Land, all of the rides are just like you're you're in Star Wars land, and then you're going on an adventure. You're going on a Star Wars adventure.
Mhm.
They're not really rides. They're like adventures that you go on. And I guess I'll just spoil one of the rides in case people care about stuff like this being spoiled. I was kind of shocked at what this was, to be honest, because I had not heard anything about it, which I thought was weird because it was pretty cool, actually.
Okay.
So the ride, I forget the name of the ride. I'm going to look it up because I think it's called Galaxy's Edge, possibly.
Isn't that the name of the whole area?
No, I think you might be right. Galaxy's Edge rides. Sorry. So basically, the gimmick with this one is like the rebellion needs your help. You know, the standard Disneyland experience where you're in a really long line, and then as you get toward the end of the line, you actually sort of are now subtly in the ride because like there's a robot that's talking to you in kind of a loop of dialogue,
Mhm.
giving you context of like what's about to happen, and then suddenly like a door closes behind you, and now Rey is talking to you on hologram. Um, which, by the way, just the simple illusion of like, oh, that's like a legit Star Wars hologram talking to me. I don't see what they're projecting that onto. It just looks like the kind of grainy blue hologram from Star Wars, and you're like, huh, okay, that was subtle. That was probably really hard to do, actually, and it worked. And it worked directly, right? And then uh, they're like, quick, get on the ship, and you get on the transport ship, which is like a big, I mean, it's a room, is what it is. It's a room, okay, but it looks like it looks like a Star Wars ship from the outside. You run into it, the doors close, and then you're looking out the windows. The windows, of course, are all just TVs, but there's like windows on the front, the back, the sides. And then, your ship takes off, which, you feel the ship rumble under your feet, and then you're looking out the windows and you see, oh no, there's TIE fighters coming. And you look out the left window, you see TIE fighters. You look out the right window, you see TIE fighters. You look behind you, you see the planet receding. You look ahead, you see the Star Destroyers. It's all like, oh my God, like again, attention to detail and like the thought of all of this, where like if you're at the back of the thing, you're mainly going to see out the back window. And if you're at the front of the thing, you're going to see out the front window, and you're going to get like slightly different experiences depending on where you are in this big room, which is all crazy to me that you would design the ride this way, because everybody's going to have a different experience. But that's kind of awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the ship's going to tractor beam. The Star Destroyer got us in a tractor beam. Oh no. And then the door opens, the same door that we just walked in through, except now we're in a Star Destroyer. We were pulled onto the Star Destroyer, and we didn't feel the ship drive into a different area. We're just with I'm trying to convey that like the psychological like Penn and Teller magic trick perception of like, I just walked onto this ship from a line in Disney World, and then I walked out through the same door and I'm on a Star Destroyer. And there's like this giant, you know how they have those like airlock walls in Star Destroyers?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's like a gigantic wall. It's like the size of a soccer field, and it's just like that airlock wall. And of course, it's a TV screen, but it's huge, and you see like TIE fighters flying by. And it's like, yeah, like if you like really nitpick, you can see that it's not real, obviously, but there's like stormtroopers everywhere, and there's like the park employees, and there's Imperial uniforms. And my favorite part of the entire ride is that the Imperial officer Disneyland employees treat you like shit, and they're like, walk that way, get in line in groups of 4 quickly. And like, they're like giving you instructions, and they're like, if you have any questions or concerns, keep them to yourself. And it's just delightful because you're being berated by Imperial officers, which is an experience I didn't know I needed in my life. Okay. And then only then does the ride really start, because you get in this, like, you get rescued from a jail cell, or Kylo Ren's trying to read your mind, and like a ton of stuff happens. And then you end up finally getting on this little cart, and the cart's driving around, and all this wild stuff is happening. People are shooting at you, and there's AT-ATs. You're driving between the legs of the AT-ATs, and the wall explodes, and you're going to get sucked out into space. which you feel from like the wind blowing on you. And this is some stuff, and then you get an escape pod and you survive. So I blew past like the actual ride because you can't really experientially describe that, but I felt like I could experientially describe all of the stuff that like gets you in the headspace where it's like your defenses have been beaten down to the point where you're actually just like, yes, I'm having a Star Wars adventure. I am having a Star Wars adventure right now, right? Like it's very hard to maintain your frame when, when you're that far into like the immersion of the situation. And that's kind of just to kind of step back and like to the meta of the conversation is like, this is an incredible like mode of entertainment, right? It's like VR, but it's not even V. It's just R. It's just
The R.
they made Star Wars a thing that you could do in real life, and that's like first like who would have. This must have been so hard to do. I can imagine trying to pitch this and them just being like, you know how much that's going to cost, and then they did it anyway. Like it's just kind of amazing to me that this exists. I guess is one thing I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been on like I said, the Harry Potter experience is I think similar, but not as like it sounds like this is supposed to be like a holistic like you are in Galaxy's Edge or whatever the fuck the place like you are there and everything like that is not quite the same thing at the Hogwarts thing at Universal. Like that is clearly still a theme park, and I'm sure this is clearly still a theme park as well. But I don't know. Like I agree with you. I've done rides similar to those. Like the before all this stuff, they had the Star Tours ride at Disney, which was
Yeah,
not the same thing, but it was similar in
it's
that
very
you know
fun
you
though.
get on
Yeah.
you get and it was fun. Like it was fun. It was enjoyable and completely forgettable as well. Like I if you tell me what happened on Star Tours, like there was a robot that drove
Yeah.
and that's all I can remember. And then they like could the thing about Star Tours is they could like change what the screens were showing to do different things. So like you could go on like different tours, but it was like a 5-minute experience. It's just like the thing's moving around a lot. You're feeling like you're flying around, and that's fun. It is fun. What you're describing is like beyond just hey, that was fun. Like the idea that you said you're in a Star Wars adventure, like you're in Star Wars, like the jaded old man in me is just like, there's no way that's true. Like, you're on a ride in a theme park, spending $1 billion every minute to experience this thing. Like,
Yeah.
that is very intriguing to me. And by the way, I'm not saying that you're wrong, and I'm not saying that you should feel embarrassed or anything by that experience. No, not at all. Like, it's just I am, I guess, in this conversation playing the jaded cynic who just doesn't buy it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one interesting thing that I realized while I was there is they have basically infinite demand for their product that they're selling.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of fine if like 90% of people hear this and they're like, that sounds stupid and childish and it's not for me, because there's like infinite people who think that sounds awesome. So like one part of the thing I wanted to mention was, so like the reason I got to go on this ride, it was actually kind of weird because I didn't want to go on the roller coaster that everybody else wanted to go on because my neck was all jacked up from all the other roller coasters I'd been going on. So I was like, I'm going to go on something more sedate. Y'all go on the roller coaster. And then it was like, oh, using the pass or whatever the hell it is. I don't actually know how this stuff works. I just do what I'm told. It was like, yeah, you can use your skip the line pass to do this Star Wars ride. By the way, it's called Rise of the Resistance is the ride that I keep referring to. So I was like, okay, yeah, I've heard literally nothing about Rise of the Resistance, but I'll go do Rise of the Resistance because it's like the only thing I haven't done yet, and we're gonna leave tomorrow. So I'm like totally unprepared for this experience, and not like anticipating it happily or anything. I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, a Star Wars ride, and then it's this, right? So like that's part of the context. But then the other thing I want to say is like, it was nighttime when I did this because it was like the last thing I did on the last day. Sun is down, and the entire Disney Star Wars land is packed with grown-ups wearing Jedi robes and carrying lightsabers. And that's the people I was in line with predominantly. And this is just some random Thursday night. right? So
Hmm.
like, this is what I mean when I'm like, it doesn't particularly matter if I'm even doing a good job pitching this because they don't need my pitch. They've
Yeah,
got
no. I mean that like
uh,
this thing has been doing very, very well, and I think you're
mhm.
absolutely right that like when Disney bought Star Wars, I think it was like, yeah, we're gonna make more Star Wars movies, and those will probably make a lot of money. But I think like the long term plan was like this is the way we can get an infinite money out of this stuff
Uh-huh.
like this, and like yeah, I mean like look, I think it's so cool that this exists, right? Like because again, as a kid like this is all I wanted in the world. Like all I wanted in the world was like you're sitting there playing video games, Star Wars video games, and all you want in the world is to be able to like go into Star Wars
Yeah.
and like th- that would have been the most incredible thing in the world. I also have like 38 years of disappointment of like these like kind of constructed um not again not augmented reality but like immersive experiences that always to me are just kind of like yeah like I don't know like I hate to be the negative person here but like my experience with this kind of thing is it never lives up to the way I imagined it in my head like
Sure.
what's it going to be like to go to this immersive thing it's going to be like you're there and oh it's really awesome and then it's always just been like no I mean it just kind of feels like a theme park. It's a cool theme park. It costs a lot of money, but I mean that's like
Yeah.
I mean the weird thing about this is primarily probably driven by my Harry Potter experience,
Uh-huh.
and I fully acknowledge that like I was just not a person that was that into Harry Potter. Like I read all the books and thought, hey, these are pretty good. I enjoy these. But like it was not like an integral important part of my childhood. And it is absolutely true that what they are doing here objectively is mining your childhood nostalgia specifically.
Yeah.
Um, like
You know,
that is what they're doing.
yes, they are. It's funny. I wanted to mention this, not just childhood nostalgia, because so I did Star Tours too, of course,
Hmm.
which is pretty much exactly as you remember it, except they changed. The robot is no longer the same robot. It's actually just C-3PO, and
Oh, okay.
C-3PO is like the joke is that he's like, I'm not supposed to be the pilot. I was just fixing this console for R2, and now like robotic C-3PO is freaking out the whole time, and it's good, it works. But like what I was going to say is when they do the little like so in the middle of Star Tours there's always like the thing stops for a second, presumably while the ship is like getting back into position, and like you get a little hologram from somebody. And I think in the past it's been, I forget who it was in the past, but this time it was Cassian Andor giving us the secret message.
Oh, so
And
again, specifically targeted towards you.
yes. Yes. And that's what, and this is the thing where again it's like vaguely embarrassing to say, but it's like, oh my God, it's Cassian Andor. He's giving me a secret mission, right? And like obviously I know that it's a ride, but there's that little part of you that's just absolutely tickled by like, I don't know, just the idea of this and the 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 opportunity to pretend to be involved, right? Like
Yeah.
me and my brother would with the assistance of my parents flip over our couches in the living room and pile pillows around in like a structure and then like bring like video game stuff inside the couch we like to reconstruct the Millennium Falcon. And there's a ride on this. I didn't even talk about the Millennium Falcon ride. There's a Millennium Falcon ride where you just go inside the Millennium Falcon and then you fly the Millennium Falcon. And so like that's, I bring that up just to be like, yeah, it's exactly what I used my imagination to do as a child, and then they just made it in real life. And you're probably totally right that if if you came at it with an attitude of like this is fake, then it's going to look fake. It is fake, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know. It just first of all, I mean, like if we're gonna nitpick stuff, like kind of want to compare it to Meow Wolf. I don't mean like disrespect to Meow Wolf because Meow Wolf is cool, and it's kind of first and foremost like an art installation. But in Meow Wolf, you're pretty much always conscious that you're just in like a big building with some stuff in it, it's it doesn't feel magical, it doesn't feel otherworldly, whereas when you're on the Star Destroyer, there's nothing about that environment that doesn't look like you're on a Star Destroyer, you know. um it's like, again, it looks as perfect as a set would look. In fact, probably more so, because sets have a lot of stuff that the camera is not showing, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
um I don't know, like a lot of little subtle touches too that aren't going to make it into my description. Like the best I can do is try to mention, like I think my favorite example of this is there's one point when like you're in the jail cell and robotic Kylo Ren is above you and he's looking down at you, and he's like, you know, they know I'm going to get the information from them, and you know, Hux, robotic animatronic Hux, is like they'll never talk, and then Kylo Ren like reaches out to you, and like the lights in the room dim really abruptly, and it kind of gives the optical illusion that there's like a tunnel of light between just you and Kylo, or like that he's the only thing you can see anymore, which is probably just a spotlight. Like it's probably a very simple trick of optics, or not even optics, it's just a trick of light, but it's a simple trick
hmm
of light, but it gives you the impression of like he's using the force on me, and and everything except him has become dark, and he's, and like the rumble sound happens, like like
yeah,
he's using the force, and it's like this is all very simple stuff I'm talking about. But when
yeah.
you're like physically in the space and this is happening all like around you, it's a very different sensation than like this same thing happening on a movie screen. um
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's true. Like the idea, and I think Jenny Nicholson talks about this in her video a little bit, of like immersive experiences being like the big thing now in like you're absolutely right that in old school theme parks, it was, there's rides. You get on
yeah,
a ride. It's a themed ride because it's a theme park. So it's the Cars ride, or it's the Aerosmith ride, and so there will be some themes and maybe even some brief storytelling to match those themes. But ultimately, it's just a ride. You get on the ride, you do the ride. It's fun. You get off the ride, you move on. And they are trying to build these things, and I think you're absolutely right that it's working. That are these immersive experiences, and I think it is very cool that we exist in a world now where a company or people will just throw basically infinity money into making a movie a real place. That
yeah,
is objectively awesome that that
right,
can happen and exist. That's so cool. And again, like the kid in me imagines what it would be like to go to Star Wars Land and get a lightsaber. And like that would have been the coolest thing ever, because when we were kids, the only lightsabers that existed were the shitty plastic ones, where like the blade would collapse in and of itself, so it gets smaller and smaller, it goes up, and it just never looked like a real lightsaber. And I always hated that this thing I was playing with, that I had a lot of fun with, but I hated that it didn't actually look like a real lightsaber. And the fake toy lightsaber technology has gone so much leaps and bounds
yeah,
since we were children, right? It is so much better now. And there's a part of me that's like, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I am I am never going to be the person that's going to dress up in Jedi robes and walk around a place. And
yeah,
I don't want to be mean to those people, because I think that's completely valid, but to me it just seems a bit silly. Like
yeah,
it just seem a bit silly. And it's fine if people don't agree and if they enjoy that, and I'm not telling them not to do it, but I would just never do that. Like same in Harry Potter. I look around, like my wife bought a robe in Harry Potter Land, and my reaction to that was like, "What are you doing? When are you gonna wear that robe?" and and like that makes me sound shitty. Like this whole conversation is making me sound like the shitty grump or whatever. And I just want to be clear here that like people should do the things that make them happy, for sure. They should. But like I am ironically the exact wrong target for this kind of stuff. Like I am looking forward to one day taking my children to Disney World, and I think it's going to be incredible living through my children's experiences. And I'm sure I will have fun myself because it's a fun place. I have a hard time believing that I will be as enraptured by this stuff as you seem to be. And again,
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with
Y-
that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
I mean, you may not be. I mean, I will say that it was kind of the Anton ego thing where I'm like, Yes, I will see what they have. And then I experience it, and the pen falls out of
Mhm.
my hand, and I have the flashback. I mean, it was it,
That's great. That's awesome.
yeah, and I say that like I also did not buy a lightsaber. I did not buy a robe. I could have, right? I was I was having the same thoughts as you, where I'm just like, that's a little much. But at the same time, I'm enjoying the hell out of just walking around this place at night,
Sure, sure.
or during the day, or whatever, or seeing R2D2, and just not even interacting with R2D2, just like, that's R2D2. You know, it's funny. It's funny because at a couple of occasions, my kids interacted with the big stuffed Mickey or whatever,
Mhm, mhm.
Minnie, or Chippendale, um, and they interacted with Chewbacca and R2D2 for that matter. And my kids are pretty old now. Like they know they know that's not really Mickey, right?
Right,
But
yeah.
but they had a great, they're very joyful, and seemed like tacitly willing to just behave as though this were Mickey. Like, this is Mickey. I'm talking to Mickey.
Mhm,
And then they'll turn to you and have a conversation about, like, how do you think you become an actor to walk around wearing the suit in Disneyland?
mhm.
And I think that's a delightful sort of double think that we're all capable of. I point out the children doing it because it seems natural. When you see a
Yeah.
child do it, you realize it's natural to see Chewbacca, which, first of all, you can't fake being a 7 foot tall, like, hairy creature. Like, obviously it's a person in a suit, but Chewbacca is also a person in a suit. So, like, you're just like,
Yeah.
it's Chewbacca. Like your brain, we're very simple creatures fundamentally. So it's
Yeah, I mean,
interesting. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, there definitely has to be this thing where you have to walk into this thing with the mindset that I'm gonna allow myself to let go a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's very easy for me not in the experience to be sitting here in my chair being like, I couldn't do that. But people do it all the time, right? Like, I mean, every time you're reading a story, you are in a sense doing that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You are suspending your disbelief. You are allowing yourself to just take something that is clearly fake and we know it's fake and allowing yourself to exist in it as if it's real. Um and this is just another format of that. I think that's, as you said, like entertainment, storytelling, these are the things we talk about, and this is a big part of it. This is a big part of what we're doing now, is these kind of experiences.
Yeah.
And they work really well sometimes. I mean, I think the Jenny Nicholson thing is a good example of the ways in which they don't work. Places that have very aggressive goals. And like, by the way, there is part of me that watches that Star Wars hotel video and is like, if they did this right, it would have been the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and, and there's still like, interesting to like, I found like the Star Wars hotel subreddit after that Nicholson video came out, and man, they were like pissed off,
Uh,
because obviously they love the hotel because they're members of a Reddit
uh-huh.
that spends all their time talking about it. And so like people had wonderful, perfect experiences in that, and felt it was well worth their money. Of course, that doesn't mean it was the same across the board, but I mean, these are cool things that I want them to make more of. And like, there's part of me that's like, we're just scratching the surface of these things, like the technology and the, like, just the history of Disney World and Disneyland is coming up with better and better technology to make rides more immersive, more involved, more story driven, and more believable. And that's just been the thing that's been happening, and it's going to continue that way. And it's kind of cool thinking of like, oh, what's this going to be like in 20 years and 30
Yeah.
years and 40 years.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you said people are able to immerse themselves in a story. I think a film is an equally good metaphor, or I don't know, analogy or whatever, or just comparison perhaps,
Hmm.
because a film is the thing where, you're watching all of this stuff happen that's fake, but you suspend your disbelief and you just accept that that's the story and that's what's happening. It's exactly the same thing, except you're just there. Like,
Yeah.
instead of the camera, instead of seeing this on a film, you're just in the space and the things are happening around you. And there's obviously some artifice because you're like strapped into this little trolley that's driving through the area, or there's more obvious artifice, but also the fact that you're actually physically in the space means you don't have the most obvious artifice of all, which is you're watching it on a screen.
Hmm.
So in other words, it removes one massive source of distancing, and then it introduces a few around the edges that you just use a different level of suspension of disbelief to sort of get
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, I am curious what it says about me and that I can't get out of my own way with some of the stuff that yeah, like I do think part of it is that in like a book or a television show or even a stage play to a lesser extent, like the method through which you're absorbing the material is fairly controlled, right? Like in a movie especially, you are seeing only what the director wants you to see and in the way the director wants you to see it. And these things, like it is designed to where, as you said, like each individual gets a slightly different experience based on where you are in the seat. Or for poor Jenny Nicholson, if you're sat behind a big column and you
Right.
can't see anything that's happening in front of you, like that is like it is relinquishing some directorial and artistic control. That it's not that it cheapens the experience, but it makes it less, to me, obviously less cinematic, but less, ironically, less immersive than like watching something on a screen, which is interesting. Like I feel like I'm going
Yeah.
through a therapy session with you
Yeah.
right now,
Well,
trying to get to the bottom of what the fuck is wrong with
I
me.
mean, I think there may just be like, first of all, you don't literally think that you're literally in Star Wars. Like I don't want to
Yeah,
oversell.
yeah, no,
Like,
no, yeah,
but
obviously, yeah.
but like you are just in you are sort of unself consciously swept up in the experience, I think. And and so like I think it might just be a matter of like what's the level of the fidelity that it is managing to achieve, and how
Hmm.
how good does it actually look. Like I keep talking about the Star Destroyer, but it's like it's really cool to like, if it was just walking around inside of a Star Destroyer, that would already be kind of cool, right? Like the Millennium Falcon ride, like they clearly know what they're doing, because the Millennium Falcon the line for the Millennium Falcon ride sort of takes you through like what is basically like a pod racer repair shop. So there's a bunch of like engines and shit everywhere, which is kind of neat. But you're like,
Sure.
okay, whatever. I'm in line. I can't be having that much fun. And then but the clever thing they've done more recently is there's like stages of lines, so that you're not incredibly bored just being in line forever. So like the first line, you basically get put into your team that you're going to go on the Millennium Falcon ride with, and then you go through a door, and then you're in the Millennium Falcon in the big room, with the chessboard and the control panels, and you just and so then I think very intentionally they're just like, okay, now you just wait in this room for a while with a few other groups of people, and you walk around and you interact with it and you touch it and literally just walk around the space, and it's like a perfect replica of the main area of the Millennium Falcon, which which is cool unto itself, right? And
Hmm.
then you do the ride. So like the point is the point is I think the level of fidelity matters. And if you've only ever been on rides that just didn't wow you in that particular way, then you probably don't um probably doesn't do much for you. And I get
Yeah.
it. Like it's because like at Disneyland there's also like the Buzz Lightyear ride, and it's like, yeah, there's like Small World, and it's like, yeah, this is garbage.
But I mean, that stuff's fun too. I don't know. Like
It's
my
fun, yeah, but it's not like you're not like I'm having an experience. You're just like, yeah, this is kind of a fun thing to do with my kids.
Yeah, I mean, look here, like Disney World, Disneyland, Disney is one of the coolest places ever, and I think every child that can afford it should be able to go. And the that can afford it is becoming an increasing problem that I do want to talk to you about here in a bit.
Yeah.
Um, like my favorite memory of a Disney park, and I went when I was like 10. I went when I was an adult. I got engaged there. We don't have to talk about that. Because obviously it didn't work out.
Right.
Um, but my fondest memory of this place was when we went with my sister and her kids, and I got to see my niece meet Elsa and Anna from Frozen. And like she was a young kid, but also I think she knows on some level that that's not, as you said, that's not the real Elsa and Anna. Like the real, quote unquote, real. Like because in Frozen, that's a cartoon.
Uh-huh.
Like how could they be they're not cartoons?
Right.
But it didn't matter because she was just so excited to meet them, and it was like the most excited she had ever been up until that point in her life, and it was just so much fun to watch and experience that. And that is one of the most wonderful memories I will ever have of my niece. And Disney World gave that to her, and that's
Yeah.
awesome. And that's like I, it's for children.
Yeah.
I feel bad saying something like that, but I do like I think I don't remember if I talked about this on the podcast or just with you before, but like I stumbled upon like the Disney adult side of TikTok
Uh-huh.
one day months ago, and I was just like, this is silly,
Uh-huh.
right? This is
But
silly.
yeah,
Like the
like
people that go the people that go without any children to Disney World, like, and again, I say this with a caveat that do what makes you happy, right? Like this is a crazy world we live in. If something is giving you joy, do it. But it's just a little bit ridiculous.
yeah, I mean, I think maybe my sense of how ridiculous it is has waned somewhat. I don't know. It's like, again, I'm not sure whether Star Wars Land is for kids or not, because I'm not actually sure that kids give a crap about Star Wars, honestly.
Yeah, no, I mean that is the interesting thing that's happening here, Matt, is that Disney is leaning into the Disney adult thing because it's making them a lot of money. Because what does a Disney adult do? They go to Disney World every year and buy gobs of ridiculously overpriced merchandise,
Uh-huh.
and give Disney a whole lot of money. And it feels to me like stuff like Star Wars Land, while I think definitely like has things that kids would enjoy, is meant for middle-aged Star Wars obsessive people,
Yeah.
that want to bring their kids, certainly, that have kids that want to bring their kids, but it is for them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the it's I mean, I think they think about it really carefully, because I think it is designed for both, but it's definitely designed for both and not
Yeah.
for the kids. Like the Millennium Falcon ride, at the end of the ride, you get to push the little lever and you go to light speed. And that's for me. That's not for
That's
my
pretty
kids.
cool. Yeah, yeah,
That's
no,
for people
definitely.
my age who watched Empire Strikes Back 500 times till the VHS broke.
Mhm.
That's not for my kids who've watched each Star Wars film like once and were like, boring. It means nothing to them, right? I mean, yeah. So all these little touches, they're absolutely for
Yeah.
the adults. Yeah. So I wanted to not move on from the Jenny Nicholson thing, because I think there's some interesting things to say there, and I want to say them carefully, because I enjoyed her video, first of all, and
Mhm.
I'm and like it's I agree with you. I agree with what you said a minute ago, that like, oh, this seems like it could have been awesome, actually. And it's a shame that it seems like they kind of screwed it up, and then they probably cut some corners, and then maybe they ran out of money and couldn't do some things the way they wanted to do them. And I think they're maybe still dialing in the sweet spot of like what they can do sustainably, or like what's worth it to do.
Mhm.
And for me, I think like the thing about the Jenny Nicholson video that was kind of front and center to me was like, the complaint was not like, oh, this sucked. It was more, oh, this sucked considering how much you were asking me to spend on it. Um,
Yeah.
which is it, meaningfully different, actually, right? Because it's um like I might have had a different attitude about Rise of the Resistance as a ride if it were like $200 to go on the ride or something like that, right? Like I would have been like, oh, this
Mhm.
better be a damn good ride, right? Like, and then if some minor thing about the ride was broken or whatever, I would have been like, ruined. It was ruined. The whole
Yeah.
ride was ruined because Kylo Ren's lightsaber wasn't working. Um, which, I mean, maybe it wasn't. I have no idea. I don't care, because to me that was just one of the things I did when I was at Disneyland, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're going to the Star Wars hotel and it costs you $8,000, and like some of the specific things you were looking forward to don't work, and you're really invested in it, uh, you're going to be understandably really disappointed.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really interesting part of that discussion, actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, because I agree with you. I think what we're running up against here is like, to make an experience that is like perhaps up to the standard of old curmudgeony asshole me. It costs an exorbitant amount of money, right? It does. Like the Star Wars hotel probably cost like like, I bet, even though they priced it extremely high and it was very expensive, I bet their margins were not great on that
Mhm.
thing. I
Yeah.
bet they didn't make a lot of profit off of it, even when the hotel was fully booked. And of course, it's impossible to do that. And it gets to the point where you're like, okay, can this kind of cool shit exist in this world? Like, is it economically possible? Because yes, you're absolutely right that the Star Wars ride you rode, that was extremely cool, and I believe it was awesome. And I, frankly, like, as negative as I've been, I kind of want to go and ride that ride now. It sounds cool. Um, that was not like extra money, but Disneyland is really expensive. And
Yeah.
like, one of the thing that's been happening in these parks over the last few years is that they have basically turned theme parks into airplanes, in
Uh-huh.
that they are going to nickel and dime you for every single thing. Like, I remember when we went in the 90s, and the big thing was, if you stayed at the park's hotel, like you stayed at a hotel on premises, which they want you to do because they get more money, you get early entrance into the park. You get, I don't think they were calling them fast pass at that point, but you get to cut some of the lines. You get like like that was that just by staying on a hotel on the park, you got that. And now all of that stuff costs extra money. All of it. Like, there was a shuttle that took you from the airport, to your hotel as well, so you didn't have to worry about that. They've gotten rid of that. Just like everything costs more money now. Nothing, very few things are included. You have to pay extra money for all these things, like the genie pass. I don't even know what it's called anymore, but they are just like. And I flew on a plane recently because we went to Bangor, and I was reminded of how much air travel just fucking sucks now. It's
Uh-huh.
just the worst because it's been commodified into misery. And like, I feel like that's what's happening. And perhaps the reason it's happening is, I mean, one, because there's people want to make as much money as possible, as much as possible. Of course they do. But also, like, it just costs a shit ton of money to keep this stuff going. It just does. And I don't know, like, I feel like that sucks because I feel like there's millions of people that are just completely priced out of participating in this
Oh, for
stuff, just
sure.
completely.
Yeah.
Or even if they're not priced out of all of it, they're priced out of an experience that is remotely good, that they'll sell you a ticket to Disneyland for like $200 or whatever. But like, if you don't get all the extra shit, your experience is going to suck because you're just going to be on lines for days, and
Yeah.
that's all of it. And
Yeah.
that that sucks, man.
Right.
That really sucks.
Yeah, there's definitely like a right way to do it, and the right way is like 5 times as expensive as just like getting a ticket and going.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you know, I don't know what to do about that, quote unquote. Like, there's nothing to do about that. That's just business, right?
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
weird. It's funny because I like I used to be like a vacation snob. In the specific, so, I think I probably mentioned before, like, my family lived overseas. I grew up overseas partially.
Hmm.
We'd vacation in places that are just not even practical for most Americans, because they're like a 12-hour plane flight from here, and they're not that far if you live on the opposite side of the world.
Hmm.
And then we'd fly back to the US and maybe stop over somewhere interesting like Europe on the way, right? So like, just grew up with a sense of like, vacations are like snorkeling and scuba diving in amazing places, and then seeing like historical monuments in places that no one ever gets to see.
Hmm.
And I feel bad for all those petite bourgeois Americans who think that Disneyland is a real vacation. Um, but like, then I went to Disneyland a few times and was like, actually, this owns, it is really, really expensive though.
Yeah.
And that's why I bring in the being a vacation snob thing, because it's like, you could actually just like go see the Louvre and like
Yeah.
like tour around. Like you could have a pretty good like European tour for the amount that it costs for a family to go to Disneyland and have a really good time at Disneyland.
Mhm.
But that's the thing. You could do the economy version of Disneyland too. That that exists. It's a lot less fun, like you said, which is kind
Yeah,
of
there's no way, like, you're just not gonna have enough time. Like, these parks are so crowded, man. Like, they were crowded in the 90s when I went. I remember we went in February to try to avoid the crowds. Like, February, not a very popular time to go to Disney World when I was in 5th grade. We had to we had to make up a dead ant so my older sister could get out of school because they would not excuse her absences. So we made up a dead ant and we went to Disney World.
oh my god.
And it was still packed. It was still packed, and that was in the 90s in February, and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I mean, like the experience of I think you are correct in that they've done as good as they possibly can do to like disguise the fact that you're spending 80% of your time in the parks waiting in a line. Like
Yeah.
they've done a really good job by adding these kind of I'll say the word again, immersive line experiences. They have succeeded in trying to hide the line. But like you're just waiting in a line. Like, yeah, I'm seeing like C3PO give a pre-recorded message that like I've been in the line for an hour and now I've heard it 6 times play over and over again. Um, like you're just in lines.
Yeah, I guess so. It's funny. I think at a certain point, after hour like 20 of being in lines, you kind of click over into just like, okay, this is fine actually. Like
So you just are driven insane. Is
maybe. I mean, it was like one thing that was interesting to me is, um, I don't know if I changed or if people changed. No, it must have been people that changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Because like I'd be sitting in the line and um no one around me is like super annoyed and grumpy, and I'm not super annoyed and grumpy. It's just everybody's just there. They're talking. They're not talking. Maybe they're just standing. Nobody seemed to be miserable.
Mhm.
I felt like the Grinch. You know, they wait without packages. They wait without video game consoles in their hands. Um, they're just waiting, and they're not miserable. And I think I don't know. It's like there's an interesting psychology of the ride. Perhaps it has something to do with like knowing that it's going to be a good ride. I don't know.
Yeah, or knowing that you've just spent $10,000 on this vacation.
So it better be a good ride. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I found it interesting because um, part of it, I think. So I don't know. Maybe this is a complete tangent, but it feels like maybe not. Is that the last time I went to Disneyland before this? I had like a baby and like other kid in a stroller, and that is just a pain in the ass to have
Yeah, yeah.
to have to push a stroller through Disney crowds where. I mean, it just anytime there's a crowd with a stroller, it's just not fun. And then you have to deal with like where are you going to park the stroller, or like, okay, this kid can't go on this ride, so I guess you go on the ride with this kid, and I'll just like wait with the baby, and like that was just not really very fun. But this time, every kid could go on every ride they wanted to, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
Like there was very little whining about lines or walking, considering how many lines and how much walking there was.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very good at their jobs, right? They do a very, very good job at disguising that, hiding it. There is a lot of, you're absolutely right. Like the detail of these places are incredible because, whether it's just the overall architecture of the place, the design of the footpaths, like all these things, everything has thought and care behind it to maximize enjoyment and minimize displeasure. Like that is the goal of the place, and also to maximize the amount of money they want you to spend. But that's beside the point, or perhaps is the point.
Right.
It is rather. It's like a modern marvel of engineering in a lot of ways that they're just looking at all these problems and just working to solve the problems as best as they can. And the result is they're making a lot of money because
Yeah.
isn't the parks like we talk about Disney and the box office slump with the MCU not doing as well, with Disney Plus not doing as well, but the parks department is making a lot of money, or at least they were. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if that shifted or not.
They are, I believe their parks experiences and products segment is more than a third of their total revenue
Yeah, that's
at this point.
crazy.
And the total Disney revenue it took a really big slump in 2020, like
Yeah, what happened
basically.
there?
Yeah, right. So I don't remember, but I mean, actually, it was interesting because it was like ramping up really sharply, and then 2020 happened, and then it fell back down to like 2018 levels. But now it's sort of that thing where if you just squint and draw a line through it, it's above where you would have expected it if the original trend line had just continued.
Hmm.
The total revenue. And I it's hard to find good numbers on these things. I mean, I'm sure I could find
Sure.
it if I dug for it, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
I mean, they
I
want to
wasn't.
disguise it and
Yeah,
clean it up and
yeah.
make it as pretty as possible. So you're never gonna find like the clear, unadulterated, like perfect numbers. But yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it seems like Disney's doing great actually. I mean, like yes, COVID was a big hit, but it seems like they're doing great now. Just empirically, just having just gone there, it's clearly packed. They have no trouble. There's basically people going through the turnstiles as fast as they can physically go. Right? It's
hmm,
not
yeah,
so. I don't know. It's interesting. I think about the economics of this and how like I foresee a future where it actually becomes cheaper to make stuff like this. I mean, that's kind of there's just the trajectory that we're on, right? In the 90s, you just could not have done something like this. It just
yeah.
wouldn't have been feasible. It just would have been absolutely, ridiculous. Now you can do it. And then I think in 20 more years, you're going to be able to do it affordably. And then maybe you make a bunch more of these, right? Like maybe there's not one, I've honestly sort of tried to game this out in my head. And I'm like, what if it costs $1 million to build a Disneyland instead of $10 billion or whatever? It's like they'd probably have one in every major city, and people would
Sure.
probably go all the time. And like they're really good at doing it, and they'd probably make them really good because the technology to make them good is there. Um, I wouldn't at all be surprised if we were going into a world that looked more like that. And just I kind of cross checked this and found that like there are a lot of these little pop up sort of experiential things in various places. If you just Google in your own town, you'll probably find a surprising number of things that are maybe not literally Meow Wolf, but like Meow Wolf is a good example of like some kind of experience based kid friendly uh museum is not quite the right word, but it's an amusement park is also not quite the right word. It's
Hmm.
like a little experiential place you can go for a curated experience of some kind.
Yeah.
That was not really a thing when we were kids, and it's become more of a thing over time. And I think more recently it's become even more so of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, some dinosaur
Yes.
event thing came to Dallas a few months ago, and we took my son because we were like, "Oh, a dinosaur thing!" Like parents are always constantly looking for like things to do for their children because they're like, "God, what are we gonna do with the kids today?" So, like we're always looking for that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was fun. Like I mean, it was you know it
Yeah.
wasn't Disneyland. It was like some of the dinosaur statues you could tell were a little run down,
Uh-huh.
a little damaged from having to be taken down and set up every other week and that kind of stuff. Like, uh, we were in the fair park where the Texas State Fair is, and like it's just in a big giant building that's like disguised and masked to look like all these things. I mean, but it was fun. It was fine. My son enjoyed it.
Was this the Jurassic World thing, or was this something else?
I honestly don't remember what it was called.
Because
Um,
I feel like
it
on
wasn't Jurassic Park branded. It was just
yeah, okay.
some thing.
because I know I told you about the Jurassic World thing that I did that was exactly this thing we're talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
like, it ends with a T-Rex breaking containment and trying to eat your family, and it's like a full-size animatronic T-Rex, and it's amazing. Like this, and this was just like, this was like a thing that they drove around between cities. Um, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like this is an under-discussed development because they certainly didn't have stuff like that when we were kids.
Yeah, I mean, at least that we knew about. I mean, I agree, and like I think it's cool. I will say this again with all my negativity, like having cool experiences that require people to leave their house and go somewhere is good. I think
Uh-huh.
it's
Yeah.
it's a good thing. Like I would hate for the future of this to just be, don't worry, we're all gonna have AR headsets or VR headsets in the future, and you don't have to go to Anaheim to have this experience. You could just do it on your couch. And I was like, no, going is part of the thing.
Right.
Going and being somewhere and having it physical and tangible, and even if the lighting on the A-wing is being ruined by that damn sun, it still that it's there is an important part of the experience.
I agree. Yeah. It's not even comparable if there were just like, oh yeah, there's a VR Star Wars game. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I play lots of video games. It's not special.
Yeah.
This feels special. I don't know. There's a whole psychology around it though, where it's like maybe it feels even more special because you had to fly to Anaheim to see it. Maybe it wouldn't have been special if it were just like downtown, I
Yeah,
don't know.
and I do wonder, I know you said your kids like obviously were not as into it as you were, but like I feel like you might not have had as good of an experience if you were there just by yourself still.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's the first time we went to Star Wars Land, I was with them. But then when I went back for the ride, I was by myself. And
Sure.
and that was sort of, I was actually kind of doing a little anthropological experiment on myself where I was like, can I transform into a 7-year-old child psychologically? And the answer was yes, apparently.
And then you've never recovered from
And then
that
I never
ever.
recovered. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize, by the way. I didn't mean to like. It's just like this is kind of as we were kind of sitting down and preparing for this, and I was just thinking about it. I was like, I don't think I like these things,
uh,
and I was like, I'm gonna just completely squash Matt here with my. And again, I think it's fine to enjoy these things. I hope I didn't come off as like these things shouldn't exist and they're stupid, and that was not my intent. It's just like I think it's interesting that I am so incredibly moved so often by like movies and television and these things, but those kind of experiences have at least up until now not had that kind of effect on me.
yeah. So I guess I'll just make one comment there is like the I certainly didn't like cry or anything. Like the
Yeah,
emotion,
yeah.
like a films definitely take the cake when it comes to having like a direct emotional impact. Except one thing about films is that we're totally oversaturated on the spectacle of film now.
Hmm.
Like it really takes a lot,
True.
something really special and unique for us to be like, whoa, that was awesome. Normally, like they can try really hard and we're just like, yeah, I know, I've seen every permutation of this before. um but some other switch is flipped when it's happening in front of your eyes and there's no, there's no CGI because you're just seeing it, right?
Yeah.
That flips, that sort of turns back on the ability to be awed by spectacle, I think. So while it was, there was no emotion to it whatsoever other than just like, whoa, cool, as a child would say,
Hmm.
or me.
Yeah. You know what I think I think I've cracked what my problem is.
Okay.
I've got it. It's that I hate people.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, that's kind of a joke, but I was thinking about, have you seen those, like, I don't know if they're Twitter or Instagram or whatever. There's like these pictures of these like beautiful places on Earth, and that are like obviously these curated, edited pictures, and then like it'll cut to what the experience is like when you go there. And like the thing normally is like you have this like beautiful vista, and then you cut to the reality, and it's like there's just like 700 people standing there all experiencing the beautiful vista, and it just kind of ruins it for you.
Uh-huh.
That's, I think, what my thought is on these kind of experiences, where when you look at them from afar in like the advertisement or like manicured, curated sales pitch on what these things are, it's like, oh wow. And then you go there and you're just like, no, I'm just swimming through a crowd of thousands of people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that Hogwarts castle looks real cool. Too bad I can't see it because there's like 800 people in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that at Disneyland. I think that's one funny thing about human memory of experiences is that you tend to sort of brush all that stuff under the rug in retrospect, even though at the time
Mm-hmm.
it probably sucked. Like, for example, we went to see one of those nighttime shows that you may not even know about because I didn't, but it's just like a big light show on one of the lakes. And the way they kind of have it naturally set up is
Mm-hmm.
like, well, it's a lake. So people can congregate around the sides of the lake and everyone can see the middle of the lake. And then the light show happens on the lake and on an island in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
And it was kind of miserable because thousands of people are just like crammed cheek by jowl, and there's no risers or any kind of like slope, so you're constantly like jockeying and like bobbing your head back and forth to just like see past the people in front of you, and then assholes like me put their kids on their shoulders so their kid can get a view, and then the people behind me can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just happening everywhere all the time, and then people are getting yelled at by the staff for like crossing chains that they're not supposed to cross, and it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Certain parts of this experience seem much better thought out than other parts, and the worst parts are all centered around exactly what you just said, where it's like, this is like 5 times as many people as like they actually had in mind when they designed this experience.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I completely agree. I've done those shows pretty much every time I've been to Disney. So my mother is like a planner, like an
mhm.
extreme planner, and she likes to plan out all of our vacations to a T. So every time I went with my family, like one of the nights we had set aside to go do those night shows, and that was my experience with them every single time, which is like, this is cool, but miserable
Uh-huh.
actually.
It's cool when you remember it, but
Yeah,
at the time you're like just mad. You're mad at everyone
yeah,
around you.
yeah.
Uh,
Yep. That's Disney World.
uh-huh,
Cool, and you remember it fondly, but you're mostly just mad at everyone.
uh-huh. Yeah.
I actually think like it's like absolutely terrifies me, the idea that having my children there and like losing them in the crowds. It's terrifying to me.
Um, I think that was it's definitely more of a worry when mine were smaller. I mean, that just
Yeah,
was never an
yours are
issue.
old enough now that that's
Yeah.
yeah.
That was never even close to it. We even kind of split up the group a couple of times, and there was just not even like a scare of like somebody turning around and not finding, it was totally fine. Which I guess, like I say that because before going, that was a little worry nagging in my mind, was like, man, how am I going to keep these kids together? I can barely keep track of them when we go to the mall. Um, and yet there was no problem, because I think everybody was just aware of like, hey, this is chaotic. Let's be a little bit more attentive than
Sure,
usual.
sure. All right. Well, anything else you wanted to specifically talk about here?
Nah, we spent like 95% of the time talking about Star Wars Land, which isn't necessarily what I walked into this expecting to happen, but I'm not surprised it happened because Star Wars Land was the biggest surprise for me, and I think everybody kind of knows what Disneyland is, so I don't need to be like, do you know what Disneyland is? Um, but it's cool. I like the concept of theme parks. Yeah,
I do too, and I, I just part of my problem is I feel like they're going to eat themselves with this kind of um commoditization
yeah.
that it seems like we're going through.
I heard someone apply the word "inshitification" to it, which is a word that I've normally heard applied to like web experiences, right? But
Hmm.
it is kind of the same idea, where it's like you're the MBAs take the helm, and they make everything cheaper and worse and more
Yeah.
expensive, or more expensive, and then they try to cut margins, and
Yeah.
it just ends up sucking. But
Yeah.
I
I mean,
don't. Yeah,
sorry, go ahead. No, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say I don't think that's happening though, because Star Wars Land was clearly incredibly expensive. So I wouldn't say it's in shitification. I would say maybe it's just becoming more expensive, which is
Yeah.
not quite the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, perhaps my airline metaphor is just not really works. Because yeah, I mean, it is certainly not that that experience yet. Of the horribleness that is air travel, which by like the just absolute thing that breaks my heart more than anything in the world is that we've taken what is objectively the coolest human invention of all time, which is flying through the air in a plane,
Yeah,
and we've made it the most miserable experience possible. It
yeah,
just is awful. I hate that. I hate that that's the case.
me
Like,
too.
nobody likes flying on airplanes. Nobody.
I agree. It makes me sad. It makes me sad because my whole life I've loved travel. I've loved going to airports. I've loved
Yeah.
flying. And this year, I think, was the first time when I realized consciously that the thought of future travel was making me go, ah. And that's
Yeah.
never happened before. Like, and
Mm-mm.
that makes me sad because it's like, oh, the world got smaller for me suddenly, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my dad was a pilot, so we flew all the time. Like my childhood was flying on airplanes all the time, and I loved it. I loved airplanes. And I hate it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely hate it.
Well, I'm sure it'll all get better suddenly.
But you know what I do
Somehow.
like?
What?
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, I like some aspects of Star Wars. It's fair to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
You know what I also like?
what do you also like, Scott?
The Aliens franchise. Boom. Transition. I did it.
You know what else is in space? Aliens. There you go. Do 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 doof.
Perfect. Better than mine. Thank you. Yeah, I really just wanted to wrap up this episode, Matt. I kind of wanted to do like a end like second half of 2024 movie preview, but I didn't prepare enough for that, and I didn't send it to you in enough time for you to prepare as well. So I thought we could just do like a mini version of that where we talk about an upcoming sequel to one of our favorite films ever, which is Alien Romulus, which is coming out in August. The trailer dropped a few weeks ago, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, Matt. What do you think about this newest Alien movie?
Well, I like the trailer. I don't really know much about like where are we in the timeline or who's directing it. I kind of forgot all those details, so you'll have to refresh
Mhm.
me.
Sure,
But like, it's a good trailer. Like,
it
it's a
is.
good trailer.
Yes,
It's a scary trailer. Yeah.
it is a trailer that is definitely leaning on um, iconography from the franchise, right? But in a way that feels not exhausting. Like it mostly feels like it's leaning on Alien, and maybe a little bit of Aliens, but mostly that kind of stuff. It's directed by Fede Alvarez, who directed the Evil Dead remake that came out in the early 2010s. He directed a horror film called Don't Breathe in 2016 that I really enjoyed, actually. That was like pretty into that. It's the concept is some kids break into an old man's house wanting to rob him. He's an old blind man, and it turns out the old blind man is like a psychopath that like kidnaps and tortures women, and he hunts them even though he's blind. He cuts all the lights in the house off and then slowly hunts them, and they have to quietly sneak away from him because he's got super hearing. Fun concept. I can see how it relates to this Alien film.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about it. Timeline wise, it's supposed to take place between the first and second movie. So I think if you look closely at the trailer, one our main character, it appears, lives on LV 426, the planet, and at some point leaves the planet and goes into space. An alien's gonna be there somehow.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, I'm into it. Like I feel like this is interesting in a way that doesn't feel like they're doing the eventual like, oh, we get far enough along in a franchise and we just kind of have to soft reboot it. Like it's not they're not they're not doing that, but they're not doing that either.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, like so we all love Aliens because it is very far away from being Alien. Like that's that
Yeah.
it took this idea and then went in a really interesting, clever, creative new direction.
Yeah.
And I like that. But also it's good when there's a return to form and it's like this is what was good about the original. Let's take what works and but have somebody have their fresh take on it. So I think there's space between reboot and what I just described there. And it's funny. I didn't even think the word reboot until you mentioned it in this context. And then I was like, you're right. This is kind of reboot territory, but I'm okay with it because it was a really good trailer.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to, like, obviously it exists between those two movies. I don't think Sigourney Weaver is in it, so it kind of gets to live outside the established lore a little bit, but I do think there's going to be a temptation to like tie it back. Like, are we going to see some characters that we recognize in this movie? I don't know. I'm intrigued by that idea. Intrigued in a bad way. Like, I don't want that. I want this to get to be its own kind of standalone. Um, yeah, like reboots, not, but strip this down to, as you said, the things that worked the best about the early moments of this franchise, and do those well and make it scary and fun, and don't do the whole whatever the fuck Alien Covenant is. Please, please don't do that.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, I still have such complicated feelings. It's really a fascinating journey you and I have taken with the Alien sequels
Yeah.
over the years, because I think first it was just like uncomplicatedly, these are just utter trash and we hate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't actually think they're good, but I found a lot of like pieces of them to like after
Yeah.
kind of especially after deconstructing Ridley Scott.
Yeah. And I mean, and Fincher as well, because I
Yeah,
really, really appreciated Alien 3 a whole lot more.
yeah, me too.
And then, yeah, I mean, like, I famously hated Prometheus, did not hate Prometheus as much. So I'm like, I'm in this weird place where like there is a part of me that rolled my eyes the second I heard that we're doing another fucking Alien film. And fortunately, it's not the Blomkamp one, which I don't know if you remember that there
I
was going to be a
do.
sequel to Aliens that almost happened, and it seems like is finally wonderfully dead and is not going to happen.
Yeah.
This is much closer to what, like, if this is the kind of thing they're going to do with it, this is, I'm for this, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm just reeling because I'm realizing that we've done deconstructing James Cameron, deconstructing Ridley Scott, and deconstructing David Fincher, and so we've covered 100% of the official Alien sequels.
No, unfortunately, we have not, because we did not cover Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right, next on deconstructing Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Jeunet's that was top of my list. How did you know?
First up, Amelie. Actually, no, I don't actually know what the first thing he directed was. All I know him for is Alien Resurrection and Amelie.
Wasn't that movie like originally in Joss Whedon's hands and then it
Resurrection? Yes,
yeah,
it was. It was. I think he wrote it, or
yeah.
he co-wrote it.
Yeah, it has
I think it was one of those ones in like the early rise of Joss Whedon moments where he was like writing everything, because like he wrote the original X-Men, he wrote Alien Resurrection, and then invariably his stuff was like ripped apart. And I don't know how much of that movie is the movie that Joss Whedon wrote.
Right. Well, I feel like the tone of that movie is very different from whatever he had in mind, because it's got like Joss Whedon quips, and then it's got some of the most heinous shit you've ever seen in your life. So
nobody knows how to do Joss Whedon except for Joss Whedon.
Yeah, I know.
Because yeah, that's the same thing with X-Men.
Yeah.
My favorite line ever.
Uh-huh.
You know what happens to a toad that's struck by lightning?
Same thing that happens to everything else.
I mean, obviously, we know now that Joss Whedon not the best person in the world, but still, how do you read that line and go, the way we should do this is play it straight?
Uh-huh.
That's the right way.
That's definitely not going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to cinema.
Yeah. So I think the point is, I feel confident and excited about the Alien franchise in a way that I don't think I have been in a while. We're in this weird place with all these franchises, right? Like, there are some franchises that I think are doing very well. That, like, these long-term franchises that we've brought more. Like, I think the Planet of the Apes franchise is doing pretty good. That Apes movie came out earlier this year. I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it. It did fairly well, I think. And there's some franchises that are just out of ideas, and it's cool to see an Alien movie. Like, this is a movie I'm going to go see with my dad, because my dad and I always see the Alien movies together, and that's pretty cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to say? Anything?
Nope.
Did we do it?
We did it.
We did it. All right, folks. That's all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on anything we talked about today, and I have a feeling you do, reach out to us via email at doofmedia.com, on Twitter at doofmedia, or on the subreddit. That's r/doofmedia. Let us know if you're a Disney adult and if I've horribly offended you. Do you go Disney bounding? Matt, did you do bounding while you were there? Do you know what that is?
I don't know what it is, but I probably did, to be honest with you.
I don't think you did. So apparently, I guess this is not true in Star Wars land, but is true in all the other Disney parks, is you are not allowed, per park rules, to dress like a character. Like you can't come to Walt Disney World and you're Goofy. Like, you can't do that.
Okay.
They won't let you come into the park if you just, like, are wearing a Goofy mask. But, like, the way people have gotten around this is they dress up, like, in clothing, just regular clothing that makes them look like a Disney character. So, like, if you're Disney bounding as Goofy, you'd wear okay, hang on, I need to look up what Goofy wears. you wear clothes colored that match Goofy.
Okay.
And Mickey, and like, you do it that way. It's kind of a way of getting around the rules, and still getting to dress up.
Okay.
So
that's fun. I didn't do that. No, I did not.
You didn't dress up as Goofy? Yeah, here you go. I found a person Disney bounding as Goofy standing right next to the actual Goofy that I will send you.
Okay.
So you didn't do this?
It's
disappointing.
I did not. I did not do this.
I mean, look, people have fun. Let them have fun. Don't listen to me. I think you're silly, but enjoy it.
I mean, those are just my normal clothes. So, I mean,
oh yeah,
it's not.
So people, I guess you could wear robes though, because they sell robes, so they want you to wear Star Wars robes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would, not that I know what their rules are at all, but I would maybe suspect that, like, generic robe person is not a character so much as it's just like,
you couldn't dress up as, like, Darth Vader.
Right. I think they might not like that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Cool.
Anyway, this is supposed to be the outro.
Yep.
So continue with the outro, please.
Very well. You should subscribe to the Doofcast to hear lots more content on theme parks, a topic that we talk about constantly, and also movies.
Yeah, it's mostly movies. I don't want people to subscribe, because no one's going to subscribe to listen to me talk about theme parks more. Because this is like, here, let me summarize this episode for you. Matt, I had a great time at this theme park. Scott,
Yeah, basically. Anyway, subscribe anyway. Subscribe to hear my joyful takes on life and everything, and Scott's curmudgeonly stick in the mud.
How did I become this person? How did this happen?
I think you need to go to Disneyland.
I clearly do. We're not going to a Disney park until my daughter is potty trained. That's our rule. That's not doing it.
Probably a really good idea, actually.
Yeah. Anyway, you can find this and all of our shows over at doofmedia.com. And if you want to support us on Patreon, you can do that. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. You can help us pick films that we do for our council each month. You can help us pick books. You can see bonus episodes that we do. Right now, we're going through the Stephen King series Castle Rock, where I think we're releasing a new episode of that pretty soon. So you should check that out. There's tons of cool stuff. Don't let this episode dissuade you. We usually like things.
It's true.
I usually like things. In fact, I've been criticized in the past for liking things too much.
Yeah.
So
We're probably still going to be accused of being Disney shills. So actually, no, that's good. Scott had to act like he was a hard sell.
Yeah.
And it makes it seem like we're not Disney shills.
Meanwhile, I've purchased 4 tickets to Disney World.
Yeah.
Right now. Yep. And by purchased, I mean we're giving them for free. My friend Bob Iger.
Yeah. I'm gonna send Bob an email, tell him that the episode is about to drop.
Okay. Yeah, he'll definitely retweet it.
Yep. All right. And yep. Also, please consider dropping us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Each rating and review over there helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, next week on the show, we are going to finally finish our Darren Aronofsky series. We will be watching his most recent film, The Whale. We will be talking about that movie. We will also be ranking all the Darren Aronofsky films and kind of talking about what we learned about the director over these past 8 episodes. So you don't want to miss that. Those conclusion episodes are always really fun. Hope to see you there.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.